Welcome to the 2013 College of Graduate Studies Commencement. I'm David Amberg, Professor of Biochemistry, and I will be today's MC. I would like to introduce the people on stage: Dr. Steve Youngentau, Associate Dean of the College of Graduate Studies; Dr. Julie White, Dean of Student Affairs; Dr. Erin Conover, our honorary degree of recipient and our speaker and the 2004 recipient of the Nobel Prize in Chemistry; Dr. David Smith, President of SUNY Upstate Medical University; Dr. David Clayton, our honorary degree recipient speaker and the first person to sequence the mitochondrial genome; Dr. Rosemary Rochford, Vice President of Research; Aaron Glass, our student speaker; and Jason Goki, President of the Graduate Student Association. We ask that you please mute your cell phones during the ceremony, and it gives me great pleasure now to introduce Dr. Rosemary Rochford.
I'd like to welcome all of you here today, welcome our students, their family, their friends, our faculty that are joining us, our distinguished guests, Dr. Erin Conover and Dr. David Clayton. I was thinking today is a celebration, and we celebrate our students' successes. For those of us who walked that path before them, we know the hours that they put into the lab bench, the hours they've been at the computer, more than we were when my generation was, but many hours there at the computer, and the hard work they've done. One of the things that distinguishes people that get a degree in science is the ability to learn at the end of it to say, I don't know. When you start, you get into graduate school by having the ability to say, I've got the right answer to everything. You pass your exams, you get your graduate record exams, you get those great grades, and I hate to tell the family that now what we expect them to do is go out there and say, I have no idea. And it's important for them to do that because this is what distinguishes them as a scientist, the ability to create new knowledge. And the only way you create new knowledge is to say, I don't know. We're honored today to have two recipients here of the honorary degrees from Upstate Medical University that have asked those very questions and led them in very unique directions. And because of that, they both worked in what distinguishes their work, and I think their similarity is one, Dr. David Clayton has worked on the mitochondria, and I have to confess for myself, I was never that interested in the mitochondria, but he took it to another level, and you can see something that people aren't curious about, and he found a curiosity and an ability to follow that curiosity and discover new things that we had no idea. Dr. Conover as well was curious about how proteins were degraded, and using that ability and curiosity led him down the pathways of discovering the ubiquitination pathway, and also then to the Nobel Prize as well. So those pathways, those abilities to say, I don't know, is what we hope we've trained you to do. We hope we've trained you that you know how to answer those questions now, and you have the scientific ability to address the questions and do the experiments, and I hope you all include your controls in those experiments. And I know you will because you've got your degree from here and you know how to do science the right way and the ethical way. So I'd like all of us to honor and recognize our graduates here today and give them a big round of applause. And I'd also like to honor the family of the graduates that are here today for your support. Sometimes you don't get why they're working so late. You don't understand what it is that they have to go back to the lab and do one last experiment. And your patience is very appreciated. So for the families, thank you very much. So right now, we're going to move, and it's my pleasure to introduce this year's honorary degree recipient, Dr. Erin Conover. Dr. Conover is a faculty member at the Technion Institute in Israel. He's come all the way from Israel to accept this degree from us today. Dr. Conover is both an MD and a PhD. Has explored the boundary of both degrees, first getting his MD in surgery and being a surgeon, and then going back and getting his PhD. He's pushed the boundaries of science to understand, as I said, the areas of how protein degradation occurs. That curiosity and drive to go in that direction has led him to develop many, many research areas, but most currently right now, he's the award recipient of the Humboldt Research Award, the Israeli Prize, the Albert Lasker Award, and of course the Nobel Prize in 2004 in chemistry. His work is leading to new therapies for treatment of cancer and neurodegenerative diseases, and we're very proud and honored to have him here as our distinguished guest today. Thank you very much, Dr. Conover.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I'm just coming from another ceremony, that of the graduation of the MPH and medical students, the physicians. So I'll try not to bore myself and to say something different because you're such a different audience, just something that I said there, that again I'm thanking President Smith and the faculty members for the honor bestowed upon me today, and I'm truly humbled to receive it. And I said there that it took me about 8 years to receive my first degree, my medical degree, another 5 years to get my PhD, and then only a telephone call to get an honorary degree. So as you can see, I'm downhill. Let me just share with you a little bit of some tips for success, but more than that, some philosophical points about science and what we are up to. What is our purpose in life at all, and what are the goals that you are setting to yourself? And I think that, in my opinion, and I always was driven by that, life is purposeless. In the sense that all what I wanted to do is to enjoy it and to discover and to unravel new secrets, kind of peeling the onions of the secrets of nature. But you can go ahead and peel and peel and peel another layer and another layer, and you'll never get to a finite knowledge. Knowledge is infinite. And think about, let's take several discoveries, for example. Think about Watson and Crick. We just celebrated 60 years to the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the double helix. And think what happened to the DNA since then. Mutagenesis, cloning of genes, and then cloning of small organisms. And now we are talking even on cloning, we are not going to do it, cloning of human beings, but what we really want to do is to generate new tissues to replace old tissues. I think that Watson and Crick didn't dream at all of where it's going to lead. And I can tell you that it's going to broaden and broaden and broaden. Think about the brain, for example. Think about the Nobel Prize that went to Katz and Huxley about the action potential, about how the nerve is working, about the flux of ions of sodium and potassium across the membrane. We thought, wow, we understand now how nerves are acting. Think what we know now of the brain. Nothing. We don't know even the basic biochemistry of the brain, not to say anything about the high functions. What is imagination? What is love? What is intelligence? What is memory? What is it that I'm telling you, your mother, and all of a sudden a picture pops in your mind in front of your eyes and you see your mother? Where did it come from? Where was it hidden? Where is the storage? How it goes back to the storage? We have no clue. And I can tell you and guarantee you that knowledge is endless. It reminds me an old biblical story of the Tower of Babylon. I don't know if you remember it, when the Jews, or whoever they were at that time, tried to get to the secret of God. And they thought very naively that they will build a ladder, in that case a tower, and the tower will be like a spiral, like the DNA maybe, if you want to have an imagination, and they will climb and climb and climb and climb. And God got frightened from this idea. He probably still didn't appreciate his own power, whatever God he was at that time. And he decided not only to destroy the tower, but also to scramble their languages and to have them speaking general languages. This is the biblical notion that people at that time spoke only one language, and now we are speaking so many languages that many of us cannot understand one another. And obviously the idea failed. So already in the old biblical time, people realized that there is no way to get to the secret of life. For me, knowledge is kind of an opposite Tower of Babylon. We are climbing up. We are increasing the amount of knowledge. But the tip of the spiral is narrow, unlike the bottom of the Tower of Babylon that was wide and then it narrowed as they built it. They were good engineers, but they were not good thinkers. The current Tower of Knowledge is also going up spirally. but the bottom, the foundation is narrow. And as we climb up, it becomes broader and broader and broader, which makes our ascent along this tower much more difficult. And we'll never get to the secret. So remember it, because this will make you more humble in front of the complexity of nature. So never think, ever, that you are going to solve a problem to the very end. You are going to lay a brick, and then somebody else will come and lay another brick, and another brick, and another brick, and the tower will be built and built and built. And I think that this is a huge source of fun, because when there is finity, and you know that there is an end, it's not fun. It's fun to be part of the unknown, and the unknown will accompany you for the rest of your lives. So this is a little bit about my own philosophy, that I never set a purpose for myself. So we discovered the ubiquitin system. Somebody else will come and do the knockout mice or the knockout animals. Somebody else will develop drugs, and the drugs will have first generation, and already we are seeing that the second generation of drugs in the ubiquitin field is coming out, which is much better than the first generation. And there will be drugs to other targets in the ubiquitin system. There are 1,500 enzymes in this system, and many of them are potential drug targets. And I will never see the end of it. In this context, I always have a dream. And people are asking me, what is your dream? And I say, my dream is something that has to do with the essence of life. You remember, we are being born, we are living whatever life we are living, 80 years, 90 years, and then we are passing away. And I thought that my dream is to live 500 years, to live the same 80 years, but in sections. To live for 5 years, to see what people achieved, how they cured cancer, how they cured neurodegenerative disease, and then to die. And then to wake up in 100 years, to live additional 5 years, and then to see how men conquered the space, and how other problems, and how the problem of energy was solved. What are the alternative sources of energy to the fossil oil, and so on. Well, you all know that this dream is untrue or unrealistic or unmaterializable, and it reminds me a show of Mayakovsky, who was a big Russian writer, that is called The Beetle. And The Beetle is about a man that was frozen to death in the snows of Siberia, and then 100 years later, somehow the snow melted, and he woke up, and he wanted to die immediately again. He saw the telephones and the cars and all the development, and he felt himself like alienated in a very strange world. So you see, there are some faults in this dream. What will happen to me if I wake up and people will travel spaceships and spacecrafts and moving between stars and so on and so forth. But again, all these dreams and even this show tells us that we are on a route to an infinite amount of knowledge. And I think that if this will guide you, you are on to succeed. Certainly prizes are not a target in life. I never thought about it. I'm coming from a small country. I never thought of any prize. And it's nice to have them, but certainly this is not a purpose, because even if you get the ultimate accolade that people made to recognize achievement, like the Nobel Prize, you celebrate the first day, you celebrate the second day, you celebrate a month, but then you're going back to the bench and work. Because what should drive you is curiosity and unraveling the secrets of nature, benefiting humankind. Let me just end up with more earthy type, I wouldn't say advices. I never think that I can advise people, but maybe some tips. Another tip is, which is just, that is really a clue, at least to my success, is compassion. Love what you do. And I said it already to the physicians, and I think that it's true for any profession. Never regard yourself as professionals. Well, you have to be professional, obviously, in what you do. But never regard of what you are doing as a profession. Think about it as a hobby. Because if you think about it as a hobby, like you are painters, like you are sculptors, like you are violin players, then every day along a whole career of 40 years will be like a new day. People are asking me, what's my hobby? I said, my hobby? To go to the lab every day. Why do I need a hobby? And then I even convinced my university to pay me for my hobby. I mean, what's wrong with that? And I truly, every day that I walk to the lab and I talk to my students, and I'm still doing it, it's like my first day. So really, love what you do. And if you think that you are not in the right place, if some of you are into neurobiology and you like to go to yeast, and some of you are in yeast and you want to move to elegance, and if some of you are even in biology, and you are all in biology, and you want to become an architect, do it. Just do it. We live long enough. It's wrong to be stuck with something that you just happen to learn because you happen to learn it. Because your girlfriend wanted it, because your parents advised you, because you drove yourself into it, but you don't like it. There are 50 years ahead of you of a career. It's worthwhile investing another 4 or 5 or 6, changing your career route, just to get and to choose something that you love. Mentorship is another thing. Mentorship is critically important. Choosing a mentor, the right mentor, is like critically important. And if you are looking at trees of science and of success, you will see chains of succession. That there is a lot to learn from your mentor. So don't knock on any door and ask, do you have a spot for me? For the master students among you doing a PhD, for the PhD students among you, somebody who happens to have a fellowship for a postdoctoral fellowship. Guide yourself. Take a risk. The other secret of success is never do the obvious. Because if you do the obvious, you will find yourself on the highway quickly, on a clogged highway, on a Friday afternoon traffic jam. Everybody will be there. Do the unobvious. And again, I'm not telling you stories. It's my story. It's my own story. Everybody worked during the late 70s and early 80s on DNA replication, on regulation of transcription, on the central dogma of biology. We chose the opposite direction. Nobody was there. People laughed at us. People thought that we are walking into the academic cemetery. Well, even if we would have walked into academic cemetery at that time, because we didn't know that we are going to succeed, we would have doing it smiling. Because we knew that it's new, that nobody has explored the field before us. And then success came, but that was secondary. So mentorship, don't do the obvious. Love what you do. And think philosophically of what you are doing will bring you to a good success and to a high success. Good luck to all of you.
Thank you, Erin. That was a really great speech. Erin thinks of Russian literature. I think of Star Trek episodes. Remember when they come across the ship with the cryogenically frozen people from our time? And they wake them up, and the one guy, first thing he wants to do is go to his broker and check on how his stocks are doing, right? And he just couldn't wrap his mind around the fact that money was no longer necessary. But there's a dream. Next, I want to introduce Jason Goki, President of the Graduate Student Association, and Aaron Glass, this year's student speaker, and they will announce the awards for the College of Graduate Studies.
All right, Dr. Rochford and Dr. Youngentop will present the awards for the College of Graduate Studies. The first one is the award for the Professional and Public Service, which honors a graduate student who has significantly contributed time and effort to volunteer services and has demonstrated a commitment to the continuance of community programs. Will Kyle Plant please come forward to receive your award? Next, the Written Research Proposal Award is presented to a graduate student whose written research proposal displays excellence in scientific significance, clarity of purpose, and logic of execution and feasibility. Will Eric Wolford please come forward to receive your award?
The Research Presentation Award is presented to a graduate student for a Charles R. Ross Memorial Student Research Day presentation, displaying excellence in presentation style, logic, feasibility of technique, scientific significance, and clarity of purpose. This year we have co-recipients of the award. Will Jason Goki please come forward and receive your award? And will Sonia Iyer please come forward and receive your award for the best poster presentation? The Graduate Student Association Outstanding Teacher Award is presented by the College of Graduate Studies students in appreciation of the dedication and excellence to teaching. Will Dr. Stefan Wilkins in the Department of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology please come forward to receive your award?
All right, the John Bernard Henry Endowed Scholarship is presented to a student in the College of Graduate Studies who exemplifies excellence in academic and research achievements. Would Jeanette Zhang please come forward and accept your award?
It is my pleasure to introduce our secondary honorary degree recipient, Dr. David Clayton. Dr. Clayton received his PhD in physics and chemistry at Caltech a while ago, and and then became professor in developmental biology at Stanford University. It turns out he was actually there at the same time my graduate advisor was there working as a postdoc with Paul Berg. Way back when, so there's a lot of linkages between myself and Dr. Amberg and Dr. Schmidt and Stanford and Dr. Clayton coming here, so we're a pleasure to have you here. As he was working at Stanford, he then went on to leadership positions at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. For those of you who don't know, the Howard Hughes Medical Institute was founded and funded by Howard Hughes, the billionaire, but one of the philanthropy positions that he did. But it supported incredible research throughout the country and led through the Howard Hughes Medical Institute. And to be a member of that and to be a distinguished leader of that is quite an impressive academic and research feat. He's been a pioneer in the area of mitochondrial research. And again, I think, as I said, exemplifies looking at areas in the mitochondrial DNA and sequencing the genome there and understanding the different signaling pathways and moving on from there as well in terms of the research areas and exploring and pushing new boundaries. So it's a great pleasure to introduce Dr. David Clayton to talk to us today as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rosemary, and I want to thank President Smith once again, the faculty, and now the graduate students for thinking of having me here to celebrate this occasion with you. It's always a lot of fun. So you all have reached a milestone by completing a graduate degree in science, and I suspect your backgrounds are diverse. That's a good thing, which will add value to your overall educational experience, and it's something you'll remember throughout your career. My own entry into science actually started in high school and then on to college, where in each case chemistry and mathematics were my favorite subjects, although I confess that I also liked history almost as well, but science seemed like it had more possibilities. The college I attended was located in the rural farming area where I grew up in Illinois. It was Northern Illinois University, which was largely unknown and may still be largely unknown to many of you. But this year they gained some notoriety by going to the Orange Bowl and lost. At Northern Illinois University, I was fortunate enough to be given the opportunity to work with the only biochemist in the chemistry department, actually the only biochemist in the entire university. And in that little teeny lab, teeny because we're just the two of us, I synthesized an organic compound, orsolinic acid, starting with 2-hydroxy-6-methyl benzoic acid as the substrate. And it turns out it worked, that was good, but also that it was of interest to the pharmacological industry because this compound, orsolinic acid, had never before been shown or published to have a reliable synthetic scheme that could be then cranked up to industrial scale. And it had clinical application in terms of certain cell signaling pathways and so forth as a blocking agent. I think it was that event which was my gateway to think that I might be able to make it in graduate school and to consider applying. So I perused catalogs, the usual things that you do when you don't really know, but you're trying to figure out where you might like to be, and decided Caltech was where I wanted to be. It looked like the science was right. California, that would be something new and different for a farm kid. And so I applied, and I thought, well, you know, I had a publication, maybe that would give me an edge. I think Caltech's admissions committee probably was in shock to think, well, we've got this applicant, we don't know anything about this place he's from, and how did he manage to get this publication? There's something strange here. So I think they let me in just to find out what that was all about. So I got married to my high school sweetheart. We're still married, had 3 children, all through graduate school and medical school now, and headed to California with a U-Haul and $400. So it almost sounds like during the Great Depression or the Dust Bowl heading out, but not quite that dire. So I got to Caltech, and there were 16 graduate students in the first-year class. And it's still burned in my memory. We all got together, a little social, get to know each other just before classes began, and we were asked to say where we'd been an undergraduate and what we'd done and so forth. And everyone else was from Harvard, MIT, Yale, Princeton, Pomona College, and so forth. So my stomach sank and I thought, what have I done? More importantly, what do I do now? And the answer didn't take too long. I said, I got 2 choices. I can quit or I can go to work. So I went to work, and it was one of the most meaningful things in my life, sort of a metamorphosis in thinking about the world. About 6 months later, I just woke up in the morning and I realized, you know, I really think I can do anything as well as the other students in my class can do. And so all the insecurity and fear that I was just totally out of my league went away. So there's a life lesson there, I think, and that is anything that's important in your life, and certainly what you've gone through has been important in your life, you always have to give it your best shot. Because if you don't, you will always regret that you didn't and wonder about what could have happened, what could have been, where could I have gone if I hadn't really tried as hard as I could at that particular pivotal point. Would like to end this talk by reminding you what is great, in my view, about being a scientist. One, and you probably already know this, there are only a few things in life that are as thrilling and rewarding as the joy of discovery. I know it sounds a little trite, but the I saw it first is an experience that when it's happened, you wish it's going to happen, hope it happens a lot of times. It probably won't, but it's just terrific. That joy must be savored because, again, as you know, science is not easy, and you don't make a major breakthrough every few days, every few weeks. Sometimes it can be a year or two where nothing happens that really you think this was a very significant step forward in my area of interest or research. And again, you got to be in it for the long haul. That's just the way the business is. But through all of that, you have the opportunity to use the intellectual power that I know you have to pose an important question and strive to get an answer to it. And I really think that is, I won't say a noble calling, but it's certainly pretty high on the list of what anybody can imagine doing with their life. A couple of weeks ago, a former postdoctoral fellow from my time at Stanford, my Stanford lab, visited me, now out at the HHMI Genelia Farm Research Campus, where I'm located. Since he left the lab, he's been successful in the area of mitochondrial biology, and indeed, I think, is relatively prominent in the field now in his generation. And we talked about some things from years past and what had been going on in his lab recently. And he remarked, it sort of took me aback, he said, you know, you ought to really like me a lot because the last few things we've published really support the things you did 30 years ago. Now, by way of background, it was an area where there's some controversy and there's other stuff in the field. I won't go into it. I don't think it's correct, but you know, science works by stuff being tested and other people that are independently minded working on the problem, and it eventually gets sorted out, because in the end, the only thing that lasts is the truth, if anybody cares enough to continue to investigate it. So I told him, well, you know, I'm glad to hear that. I mean, that's nice, but I said, I think that really misses the point, because what you always need, where you need to have your compass pointed, is to do the best, whatever the question is, the best experiments you can to get to the truth of the matter. And you can't let prior history and prior associations and so forth, at the end of the day, cloud the honesty of your approach in how you both do the experiments and how you treat the data. The data are the data, and they always win at the end of the game. So if you'll permit me, just one more, those great tips that Erin put out. And it just struck me when Rosemary was giving the introduction about how, you know, do your experiments and make sure you do your controls. And it just flashed back, like the mother, look at your mother, the image, a memory from 35 years ago, in which another person in the lab when I was in training was this type of person in terms of how, in this case, he looked at controls. Now, there's three ways to think about doing controls. Two of them are wrong, and one of them is correct, in my view. So the first wrong one is to always do controls. And this person was a victim of every experiment was a control. But there was really nothing to control for. But he was trapped. They worked. The controls worked. And so he wasn't brave enough to jump beyond there and do an experiment where the outcome was wide open on the table. You didn't know what was going to hit you. The second mistake is the person who gets an interesting finding. I've seen this happen too. And they continue to build on that finding, and everything looks wonderful. And you say, when are you going to do this control? Oh, I'll get to it. But you know, I've got to do the next experiment and add to this because this stuff is so great. And so they wait a year later, they do the control, and you know what I'm going to say, it explodes the basis for the exciting result. So it's critical that you know when to do controls, and the simple-minded answer is whenever you have a great result, think of the best control to steer you from that result to the next level of understanding of the problem. So I congratulate you. I can feel for the amount of work you've put into all of this, both from my own life's experience and seeing my children go through it as well. So celebrate this day and your accomplishments. Consider all your colleagues part of your extended family, as you will consider those who train under you over the years. Because one of the great benefits of running a lab is it is generational. and you do have people that you continue to communicate with, and you continue to enjoy the fruits of their labors and their successes. So all best wishes for abundant results in your future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David, for some spot-on words of wisdom. I don't have a Star Trek episode for you. I was working on it, but I do have a David Botstein story, which is almost as good.
They're always good.
Yeah. They were colleagues. David Botstein was my postdoctoral advisor and a colleague of David's at Stanford. And David's famous for his sayings. I remember John Mulholland, a colleague in the lab, did his lab presentation, and John had done a lot of controls. And David finally got frustrated. He said, "John, this is when rigor becomes rigor mortis." So, classic. We call them Botsteinians. So it's now my pleasure to introduce Erin Glass, who's been selected by the students as the class of 2013 student speaker. Erin, will you please still come forward?
Thank you, Dr. Amberg. Mom, before you get any ideas about how I came to be at this podium today, let me set the record straight. I have a hard time saying no. Unexpectedly, I've come to regret my decision, as composing this short speech was one of the hardest and most difficult things I've done during my graduate school experience. You see, this is a ceremony to celebrate achievements, recognition of exceptional work by my fellow students, and the completion of a long collegiate journey for those of us crossing the stage. This occasion calls for a pep talk. Brimming with joyous recollection of my graduate school experiences, I feel the same way. and sprinkled with platitudes of an inevitably bright future. Unfortunately, I've spent much of my time in graduate school muddled in doubt, self-doubt about whether I have what it takes to be a scientist, and doubt about whether this is a pathway to a viable career. Let me explain. If my fellow graduates and I wish to pursue a career in the line with our training, we must overcome strong headwinds. We're the products of a scientific research enterprise based in large part on federal funding that's remained stagnant for a decade and is now further threatened by initially unthinkable budgetary sequestration. Funding rates for NIH grants, the bread and butter of basic biomedical research, have deteriorated to near 15%, inevitably leading to greater competition among researchers and less collegiality. The publish or perish mindset has permeated academic research so profoundly that we've learned to wield our powers of disbelief quite liberally, and with good reason. A study published last year in the journal Nature reported that among some 53 landmark papers in the field of cancer research, only 6 withstood the scrutiny of reproduction. There are obviously many factors that have led to this depressing proportion. But I suspect that more than a few of these spurious studies were the products of slipshod work that was poorly vetted and rushed out the door, leaving the author's CVs a few lines longer while littering the scientific landscape with misinformation. My fellow graduates and I now come of age, so to speak, in a society that's doubled the number of graduates in the biomedical sciences in fewer than 20 years. Sadly, much of this expansion seems to have occurred for the simple fact that, other than an unpaid intern, there exists no cheaper source of labor than a graduate student. Whether or not our nation's economy can bear this additional efflux of fledgling scientists has yet to be seen. Clearly, academia alone is incapable of absorbing this flood of graduates. Of the last generation of PhD recipients in the biomedical sciences, fewer than a quarter now occupy traditional tenure-track positions. Despite these frightening statistics, despite my doubts about funding, about postgraduate supply and demand, and despite my own self-doubt, I have emerged from my graduate school experience optimistic about our futures. Graduate students, especially graduate students from Upstate, are pretty scrappy. It's a tenacity forged during many long days and often many long nights at the bench or at the computer, toil that results more often than not in a dead end an ambiguous result, or a triaged grant. Everyone wearing these robes today has experienced the disappointment that comes with effort, time, and energy invested in a project that went nowhere. Each of us has demonstrated the determination to face failure and move forward, applying equal effort to the next project. It has been said that there will always be a need for smart people who are hard workers, and nowhere is this aphorism more applicable than in the biomedical sciences. For it's a known fact that no trained biomedical scientist has died of starvation in recent history, though I am not prepared to comment on reports of cannibalism. The latest available figures reveal a very low unemployment rate, somewhere around 2% among degree holders in the biomedical sciences. Only 1 in 50 of our colleagues is unemployed. I need not iterate that this figure is exceptional when compared to other fields of endeavor. Of the approximately 130,000 PhD holders in the biomedical sciences in the US, though fewer than a quarter are on the tenure track, more than a third are gainfully employed in non-research related careers such as scientific writing and illustration, science policy, intellectual property, among innumerable other occupations. Degree holders in the biomedical sciences have an amazing capacity for self-reinvention. So maybe the world doesn't need more tenure track professors, but the world desperately needs people with our skills, and not just our technical skills. Critical thinking, problem solving, autodidacticism, writing, public speaking. Not only are these skills essential for a career in research, but they're also a strong foundation for any other pursuit. And for those of us who will continue in basic research, I'm absolutely convinced that we're witnessing and will participate in a period of rapid and unprecedented change in science. The way that science is performed, reported, and funded have entered or will soon enter a state of flux. Everyone present in this room will be impacted by these changes. Today's graduates have the opportunity to drive them, to sculpt the future of science. Although our walk across this stage today is largely symbolic, these are the last few steps separating our lives as students of science from its stewards. Throughout the next few years, we'll assume greater control of this ship, dam the headwinds. Concerning our careers, external forces such as politics, the economy, and the job market will prove to be much weaker than the internal forces of drive, curiosity, and simple pride in our work, whatever that work may entail. I believe this has been true for all great scientists, and it's been true for all great citizens. So today, I'm proud to take these few steps and share them with my mentor, Dr. Taffet, and my family, the 2013 graduates, and all of you. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Erin. I guess we're proud of the fact that we train junkyard dogs. I often say that. It is sometimes a little tougher to get noticed when you come from a smaller university. It is now my pleasure to get to the meat of the matter, and that is the presentation of the degrees in the College of Graduate Studies. They will now be conferred by Dr. David Smith, President of the University, and Dr. Rosemary Rochford will present the recipients of the degree of Masters of Science.
President Smith, as Vice President for Research, I have the honor to present the recipients of the degree Masters of Science. They have satisfied the requirements established by the faculty and have been recommended by the faculty for the receipt of this degree.
Thank you, Dr. Rochford. Will the Masters of Science degree candidates please rise? By virtue of the authority vested in me by the State University of New York, I hereby confer upon each of you the degree Master of Science with all rights, privileges, and obligations. Congratulations. Please proceed.
Jamal Alafifi. Jamal is hooded by the College of Graduate Studies Associate Dean, Dr. Stephen Youngentab. Jamal's thesis is titled, Effects of Fatty Acid-Induced Lipotoxicity on Mitochondrial Orphodynamics and Stimulus Secretion Coupling in Pancreatic Beta Cells. Tui La. Tui is being hooded by her thesis advisor, Dr. Jinji Chen. Tui's thesis is entitled Specific Mutations in the Alpha and Beta Subunits of the Cluveromyces lactis F1 ATPase Enhance ATP hydrolysis in the absence of the central gamma rotor. Kyle Paul Plant. Kyle is being hooded by his thesis advisor, Dr. Vladimir Sirotkin. Kyle's thesis is entitled The Effects of Varying Actin and Capping Protein Concentrations on Endocytic Actin Patch Assembly in Fission Yeast Schistosaccharomyces pombe. Bruce Searles. Bruce is being hooded by his thesis advisor, Dr. Arkady Pertsov. Bruce's thesis is entitled Contrast-Enhanced MRI Analysis of the Perfusion Territories of Coronary Arteries in Swine. Makan Diwana Shoniwa. Maka is hooded by her thesis advisor, Dr. Patricia Kane. Maka's thesis is entitled Dissecting the Role of Yeast RIM8 in the Internalization of the Plasma Membrane Proton Pump, PMA1. Trista Lee Thorne. Trista is being hooded by her thesis advisor, Dr. Sandra Hewitt. Trista's thesis is entitled Contribution of Astrocyte Glutamate Transport to Hypoglycemic Neuronal Cell Death. The recipients of the Doctor of Philosophy will be presented by Dr. Rosemary Rochford.
President Smith, as Vice President of Research, I have the honor to present the recipients of the degree Doctor of Philosophy. They have satisfied the requirements established by the faculty and have been recommended by the faculty for the receipt of this degree.
Thank you, Dr. Rochford. Will the candidates for the Doctor of Philosophy degree from the College of Graduate Studies at Upstate Medical University please rise? By virtue of the authority vested in me by the State University of New York Board of Trustees, I hereby confer upon each of you the degree Doctor of Philosophy with all rights and privileges and obligations thereon. Congratulations. Please come forward.
Dimitra Aguili. Dimitra is being hooded by me, her dissertation advisor, David Amberg. Dimitra's dissertation is entitled Regulatory Mechanisms Contributing to Actin Cytoskeleton Dynamics, Organization, and Function. Dr. Chrissa Ann Dwyer. Chris is being hooded by her dissertation advisor, Dr. Rick Matthews. Chris's thesis is entitled Brain-Specific Neural Extracellular Matrix Expression and Modifications in Neurological Disease and Disorders. Dr. Tatiana Fedotova, Tatiana is being hooded by her dissertation advisor, Dr. Richard Wojciechowicz, which is just about as hard to say. Tatiana's dissertation is entitled Regulation of Autophagy by the Endoplasmic Reticulum-Associated Erlin 1-2 Complex. Dr. Erin M. Glass. Erin is being hooded by his dissertation advisor, Dr. Stephen Taffet. Erin's dissertation is entitled Studies on Connexin 43 in Immunity, Phagocytosis and Myocarditis. Dr. Nicole M Mantella. Nicole is being hooded by her dissertation advisor, Dr. Stephen Youngentab. Nicole's dissertation is entitled The Consequence of Fetal Nicotine Exposure on the Olfactory and Orosensory Mediated Responses to the Drug. Dr. Macmillan Forsey Banantenku. Mac is being hooded by his dissertation advisor, Dr. Jinji Chen. Mac's dissertation is entitled Characterization of MGM 101, a RAD52-like recombination protein required for mitochondrial DNA maintenance in Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Dr. Lee Stephen Parsons. Lee is hooded by his dissertation advisor, Dr. Stefan Wilkins. Lee's dissertation is entitled Subunit Interactions in the Yeast Vacuolar ATPase Related to Primary Sequence. Dr. Laura T Prestia. Laura is being hooded by her dissertation advisor, Dr. Stephen Yangentab. Laura's dissertation is entitled Molecular Mechanisms Underlying Enhanced Flavor Perception and Ethanol Intake as a Consequence of Prenatal Ethanol Exposure. Dr. Guanliang Wang. Guanliang is being hooded by his dissertation advisor, Dr. Jeffrey Amack. Guanliang's dissertation is entitled Roles for Rho GTPase Signaling Pathways in Establishing the Left-Right Body Axis. Dr. Janet Zhang. Janet is being hooded by her dissertation advisor, Dr. Stuart Lee. Janet's dissertation is entitled Rational Design of Protein-Based Biosensors Using Engineered Binding-Induced Conformational Switches. Xinming Jua. Xinming is being hooded by his dissertation advisor, Dr. Barry Knox. Xinming's dissertation is entitled Studies on Photoreceptor Gene Expression. We would like to request that all graduates please stand for one last round of applause. It is now my honor to invite Dr. David Smith, president of SUNY Upstate Medical University, to provide. We seem to be missing a president. Okay. I think he had another ceremony to go to. You want to take a few minutes? Good.
Please accept, and if the graduates could sit down now. I accept Dr. Smith's apologies. He has to go to the College of Nursing graduation ceremony as well. So I'd like to just wrap up this ceremony, and again, thank everybody for attending, especially thank the families for supporting our graduates. We'd like our graduates to know we're proud of them. We hope they stay in touch as members, as alumni now of Upstate Medical University, the College of Graduate Studies. And I think with that, I'd like to give them again one last round of applause and close our ceremony. Thank you very much.
This concludes our ceremony. We'd like to thank the John Spillett Jazz Duo for providing today's music. Please join us for a reception immediately following the ceremony. A photographer is available to take photos of graduates with their families and faculty. Please remain seated until the end of the recessional.